Hello my friends, this is Roman, and today we are going to talk about something important. It had been a long journey before I managed to finally record this video. The reason being is that life is quite complicated, as I'm sure all of you know already. You go to school, you don't know what for, you graduate, you go to college, and then war begins and you have to change everything around you, move to a different country, you need to pay the bills during all this time, you need to basically take what the life is giving to you only in order to, at some point, somewhere in your 30s perhaps, maybe later, maybe earlier, to grasp this moment of free time. And I mean like really free. Not the kind of free time you have while you are 15 or 20, when you go partying or you do all sorts of things, because there are like outside factors that influence you and demand that you do certain stuff. But I mean like really free. When you are relaxed and conscious and consciously decide not to do other things and focus on something more important. And the thing that I find most important, and that is why I'm dedicating this first video to it, and of course, if you have seen the title of the video, you already know what it's going to be about, but it's quite hard to explain the route you need to take to reach it. I guess at some point I realized that there is so much that I want to teach my children, so many things that I want them to know, that it's better to start preparing right now before they are grown up enough even to comprehend it. Philosophy does good job at confusing you about where to start when dealing with this foundational question. There are many researchers, many philosophers who thought about it. Oftentimes, it just happens that the more we learn a certain topic, the more we realize how little we know. Paradoxically, but then I'm sure that you have dealt with such a thing before, where you think you know something and it's just like a small little thing that you need to cover now, and you study this small little thing only to learn that this little thing was a tip of a huge iceberg, which has like millions of other things to it. And so it's quite hard. But on the other hand, if you manage with certain approach to develop a framework of dealing with the question, if you manage to develop some sort of methodology that helps you get some traction and continue going, in that case, you might really enjoy studying and get the answers that you're looking for, especially if we are talking about the question that this video is dedicated to. I guess in a certain way we can compare this issue to the horizon line, because the closer we get to the solution, the farther away from us it seems to drift. Of course, I'm talking about the meaning of life. Why do we look for the meaning of life? Naturally, when you touch upon such complicated matters, you are expected to say something very basic, very simple, very superficial, I must say, but at the same time profound. Something like the meaning of life is just to live. And that is quite fascinating, because that is actually something that I was going to be
Hold your
contemplating.
horses.
Who is that?
Look behind you. It's me, the metaphysical cactus.
Uh-huh, I see. Well, that's weird. Would you mind not interrupting me while I'm trying to explain the meaning of life to these good people? Thank you. So, as I was saying, The idea that we are
I
actually
actually would mind, because before you speak about that, it would be nice and academically correct if you provided the basis for even considering looking for that meaning.
And what do you mean by that? Why would we want to know the meaning of life to begin with?
Yes, because the mere question supposes that one can live without knowing that meaning. I mean, I know my meaning. I am responsible for the metaphysical stuff here. But I feel like could be living just fine without knowing that. So tell me first, why do you people look for the meaning of life? Why does that matter at all?
Well, fair point. I guess that if we are unable to extract any meaning from life, then, well, life is meaningless and there is no point to continue. It's only our nature to strive for meaning. And of course, it might seem that sometimes we do meaningless things, but I believe that if we think deep enough about those things, we will manage to extract the meaning from those actions. And you know what? I think it's a good time we call our good old friend Albert Camus.
Hello, who is this?
Hi Albert, it's me, Roman.
Roman, I told you before that life is mostly meaningless and please stop calling me about that.
Hold on, I'm not calling to ask about the meaning of life per se, just about the fact that it's important for us to know one. So maybe you could dwell a little about that?
Whether the earth or the sun revolves around the other is a matter of profound indifference. To tell the truth, it is a futile question. On the other hand, I see many people die because they judge that life is not worth living. I see others, paradoxically, getting killed for the ideas or illusions that give them a reason for living. What is called a reason for living is also an excellent reason for dying. I therefore conclude that the meaning of life is the most urgent of questions.
Oh, thank you. That's really deep. I really appreciate it.
Good luck in your futile endeavors.
For a moment, let's distance from the question of the meaning of life per se and take a video game or a movie as a metaphor. We play a video game because it brings us joy. However, sometimes after we do so, or if you are not a fan of video games, you can think of going watching a movie or hanging out with friends or hiking or whatever. Sometimes when we reflect on that, we may regret time spent on it. I can speak of myself as an example. I like Heroes 3 of Might and Magic. I enjoy playing it, it gives me the dopamine I need from time to time, okay? But sometimes, even if I lose the game, the enjoyment that I had during the process is so rewarding that I feel like despite spending some time on the game, I kind of compensated by accomplishing even more. Because of this dopamine dose, I'm more productive at other things. Some things that I maybe not a big fan of doing. However, there are those other times when I'm playing this very same game and I'm winning, I'm good at the game, I'm winning the match, but I still feel like I just wasted a lot of my time. Why would this be the case? I started to analyze my own experience and trying to find the difference between the good experience and the bad experience.
Well, that's because you are still a noob at the game and you keep losing at it.
It wasn't winning or losing, alright? It wasn't also the time of the day of the week, or the amount of time spent on a match. It was actually the state of mind that I had while I was playing. Because what I noticed is that every time I enjoyed the game, I could recap it afterwards. I would remember what faction I played, what hero I chose, and what were the cool moments of that particular match. And all the times I regretted spending time on it, it was vice versa. I couldn't remember it nearly as well. It was as if I just daydreamed through the entire match. This game has a lot of nuances, but basically it all comes down to the following process. For like 70% of the match, you and your opponent build up independently of each other, only to clash with each other at the end. And often it is the case that if you mess up something in this build-up phase, in the very beginning, you already know that you have basically screwed up for the entire match.
Noob.
And what I noticed is that whenever I messed up in this very early stage of the game, I behaved in the two completely different manners. First one was to just admit my defeat, quit, and, still enjoy the experience, because it's quite funny when you mess it up and you just rage quit and stuff. But then other times I would just drag on and on and on this hopeless game, only to still inevitably lose at the end. Interestingly enough, sometimes it happened so that my opponent managed to screw up even more and had admitted their defeat before I did, and so I technically won that match, but still it brought no joy. So basically it was only a certain amount of that match that I played that I enjoyed. But what made me continue then? At some point, this joy return on my time investment got so low that the only way to explain why would I continue was that I just was on an autopilot mode. In other words, the meaning of playing the video game was to have fun. And in order to have fun, I needed to be playing it consciously. Even if it meant losing a player versus player match, a conscious defeat felt way better than meaningless victory. I believe that the same could be said about most activities that we do, and also about life in general, because in life it's even harder, as we are unclear about our purpose of the goal of life, as it is the case with the video game. And that means that we are stuck with the gameplay part, with the process of living. When I launched the video game, knowing that I'm here in search of enjoyment, I could end the game the very moment it stopped entertaining me, even if it happens like 5 minutes after starting, or I could play it for hours and still enjoy it. It is very similar with life. And when we don't know what we are doing, we become anxious, and we might even think about ending it. To answer the question now of why do we need to know the meaning of life, that is because unless we are conscious about it, we can get no joy from living. In a way, I think we can say that we don't even truly live if we are not conscious about the meaning of life. We direct our existence on an autopilot mode, and we are only triggered and motivated by some sort of outside third-party agenda and influence. And by outside, I mean something that was not up to us to decide whether we want to have such a thing in our life or not. So the only way one can be enjoying their life is by being conscious about its meaning. And naturally, in order to be conscious about it, one needs to find it first. So what is the actual meaning of life? Now that we have established that we do need it, we need to start making steps towards it. And the first little step is to acknowledge the world around us and be realistic and accepting about it.
Why exactly do we need to be realistic? Why can't we find a meaning in something random, like an alien overlord?
Well, there is a good reason for that. Let's dive into another metaphor, the movie Titanic. Most of the people seen it, and most of those who have seen it do like it. We might not care about traveling across the ocean or that early 20th century atmosphere or giant ships. What we do care about, and I need you to be very attentive here, is the attitude of the characters towards the conditions that they were put in. We know that those are actors. We know that DiCaprio is not at risk and that he's going to be paid a lot of money for his part. Nevertheless, we consciously choose to ignore that and see characters as real people and their emotions as real ones. Because if we think about the movie outside of its frames, we immediately lose our interest, unless we are a learning filmmaker or an actor. If we do that, we know that in real life the two main characters are not in love and that all their drama is fake. And knowing this stuff and being conscious about it ruins the whole point of the movie, which is to show how love impacts the human behavior. Within the framework of the movie, the meaning of Jack's life is to have a relationship with Rose, and vice versa. Despite all odds, the two manage to be together and enjoy each other's company, and their love is only highlighted and set in concrete by the following tragic unraveling of the plot. Jack does not think about finding a better girlfriend somewhere else sometime later. Rose does not ignore Jack because she is too consumed by the existentialist doubts of all sorts. Her fiancé is jealous of her relationship with Jack because he does not believe that everything is in God's hands. The ship crashes because the love of Rose and Jack needs to be highlighted and not out of the randomness of nature. These frames of the movie are quite limiting, but at the same time they are very liberating because thanks to them, everything inside makes sense. And it is because everything within the frames makes sense that we love the movie. What I'm driving at here is that in order to find the meaning of life, we need to accept our limitations and be realistic about the world that we live in and our abilities in it. We don't know whether we are in a simulation or not. We don't know what happens after we die. We don't know if everything is predetermined or not. However, there are things that we do know. Science explains a lot of the processes that happen around. It does its best to give life meaning, but the more fundamental we go, the more abstract it gets. I think Leo Tolstoy has done a lot of thinking about it. Let's call him up.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Tolstoy. Could you share your thoughts on how science fails to answer the question of the meaning of life?
Sure. If we turn to those fields of knowledge that are not concerned with answering the questions of life, but only with answering their own special scientific questions, then we may be carried away by the power of the human intellect. But we know beforehand that we shall find no answers to the question of life. These areas of knowledge completely ignore the question of life. They say, "We cannot tell you what you are and why you live. We do not have the answers to these questions, and we are not concerned with them." If you need to know about the laws of light, however, or about chemical compounds, or the laws governing the development of organisms, if you need to know about the laws governing physical bodies, their forms, and the relation between their size and number, if you need to know about the laws of your own mind, then for all this, we have clear, precise, indubitable answers.
So, long story short, we do not know the limits of the universe, we do not know the smallest of the particles, we have no idea about the future of the world as well as about its origins. They say that there was a big bang and there is a great set of arguments to support it, but what was before that, right?
Exactly, Roman. I realize that these areas of knowledge may be very interesting and quite attractive, but their clarity and precision are inversely proportionate to their applicability to the questions of life. The less they have to do with the questions of life, the clearer and more precise they are. The more they attempt to provide answers to the questions of life, the more vague and unattractive they become.
Naturally, like the good-willing explorers that we are, we need to go elsewhere to find the answers to the questions that science fails to answer. And that elsewhere is, of course, faith. By its definition, faith requires no proof, and it usually has some sort of an omnipotent creature or energy that is an axiom and that lies in the foundation of its metaphysics. This allows faith to provide us with many comforting solutions. Faith explains why we are here. It explains what happens to us after we die. It also gives us guidance how to behave during our lifetime. It does all the things that science fails to do because it's fundamentally different from science, in the same way that learning certain aspects of life, studying them, is different from understanding the life in general. In his thinking, Tolstoy concludes that rational knowledge has led him to the conclusion that life is meaningless, and so he found the solution with Orthodox Christianity, changed his lifestyle a lot, and moved away from the city life into countryside, where he spent the rest of his life. Well, I think there is something wrong with such an approach, because in a way he betrays his own experience and his own way of thinking, because it is by developing our rational thinking that we as a species go forward. It is true that sometimes we may reach conclusions that we do not like, but that by itself does not mean that we should turn our back to rationality. Instead, I think that we should make a giant step forward and see faith not as something that is opposing science and rationality, but as something that is a fundamental part of it. Science and knowledge very gradually throughout our history replaced the areas of interest that were previously covered by faith. We know that we don't have to make sacrifices for rain to come. Nevertheless, every culture on Earth developed some sort of mystical explanation for the rain, because living in randomness is unbearable for our minds. My point is that just as the very first tools of the Neanderthal were rough and ineffective, those first belief systems were also rough and ineffective. But at the same time, despite being primitive, those were necessary for our species to survive and thrive. Sure, I was very happy for coming up with such a conclusion, and naturally, as it often happens, when you start, researching that idea, you quite soon realize that there were many others who thought the same.
Faith is not opposed to reason, but a mode of knowledge that begins where reason ends.
The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind.
Because it is our intrinsic built-in desire to explain, to grow, and to develop far beyond our basic materialistic needs. As a species, we live better, longer, and more productive as time goes by. And that is to me self-evident by the mere fact that you are watching this video right now. You and I are communicating right now because of the highly sophisticated technology that our species was able to develop thanks to our great ancestors not killing each other, a million of years ago. And while there is so much war and violence going on in the world right now, I remind you that when we study history, we don't name periods of peace. We name the periods of war and conflict. And that is because war is not the norm for us. Same goes for disease, same goes for lack of resources, and so on. The peace, the humanity, healthiness, and great spirit, that is the norm. We don't know why we are the way that we are, so we need to make something up. Remember the frames of the movie example. What we do care about, and I need you to be very attentive here, is the attitude of the characters towards the conditions that they were put in. If we want to reach outside of what is known to us and put the meaning of our life somewhere there, we then make our lives meaningless. Because of that, I find both opposing extreme views on the meaning of life to be wrong. Materialists claim that it is the material reality that determines our personality.
It is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness. The phantoms formed in the human brain are also necessarily sublimates of their material life process, which is empirically verifiable and bound to material premises.
But this approach makes our lives meaningless right at the point when we find housing and some food. It doesn't go deeper into more spiritual matters. Idealists, on the other hand, cast everything we can see and touch as pointless.
The external world is merely the phenomenon of the eye, striving to realize itself. The material world has no independent existence apart from the self-conscious subject. The material world is the external manifestation of the Absolute Spirit. Reality is ultimately spiritual, and matter is a limited and imperfect expression of the idea.
I believe that in order to grasp the meaning of life, we need to combine the materialistic and the idealistic approaches. We should be humble and accepting in understanding who we are materialistically. We are people. Our evolutionary purpose is to enhance our conditions of living, build better societies, and procreate in such a way that our offspring can enhance their conditions of living even further. And that is what we do as a species. We cure diseases, we build housing, we settle conflicts, we have families, and we educate each other. And the more we stick to this behavior individually, the more meaningful our lives become. This materialistic part is similar for everybody. There are, of course, cultural, economical, social differences to it, but ultimately it all boils down to not dying of natural causes, fulfilling your materialistic needs, and procreating. And of course, life is not limited to completing those tasks in a checklist fashion. Let me tell you a story of a guy called Mike.
Mike went to school because his parents told him to. He married the first person he met. They had children simply because it just happened. He went to work because that was what he thought he was supposed to do. Years passed, the kids grew up, the job was secure, but Mike felt empty. He had what is called a midlife crisis. Despite all of his achievements, he felt he had wasted his life.
This is because fulfilling this materialistic part is not all of it. Just as I described with the video game experience, it was unrewarding because of the autopilot mode, and it is the same with life. Not being conscious about what you are doing takes away all the joy from the process of life, and it's quite hard today to be conscious, especially considering the myriads of factors that try to grasp our attention and limit our awareness. Social media feed, news broadcasts, and pointless drama often fill in those time slots that we rarely get in between of doing what we materialistically have to. That is why depression and suicide mainly occur in developed nations, where people are more prone to not fulfilling the idealistic part of their living experience. And that part is all about enjoying your life. Obviously, an important condition is that this enjoyment should go hand in hand with the materialistic fulfillment.
But then Mike got a time-traveling machine. He went back to when he was 16, dropped out of high school, and just let himself go. He partied, he traveled, he did everything that brought him joy. Logically, he ended up under a bridge, broke and sick, with no one to care about him.
Because it's true that as humans, we are naturally pre-programmed to strive for good family relations and friendships and have housing and not being sick or hungry. But what is just as important is that that materialistic part should not be suppressing our enjoyment of life. The secret to happiness in life is not in checklisting all of these materialistic goals, and neither it is in just forgetting about all of your responsibilities and running around naked in the field. It is about consciously aligning the material with the ideal. Your main quest as an individual is to find a way to align those in such a way that you progress materialistically while enjoying every step of the way. Whether it means that you need to find something that you love doing and do that, or vice versa, learn to love what you are already doing, depends on your conditions, your age, and your abilities, but all in all, it is doable. So where do you find the meaning of life? You should look for it within the frames of your own living experience while taking into account your built-in human features. As humanity, we become stronger and stronger. We progress, we procreate, we explore, and we enjoy doing all of it because that is just the frames that we are given. Why the frames are such, what lies outside of the frames is irrelevant to our question. So what is the meaning of life? In short, the meaning of life is to be happily willing to fulfill your evolutionary function. The meaning of life is to become smarter and stronger, build a relationship, procreate, and enjoy every single step of it. In order to enjoy your education, you need to find the field that you are genuinely curious about to get smarter in, not just read scientific books for checklisting being smart. In order to enjoy becoming stronger, you need to take care of your health and finance in a way and the areas that you enjoy. Not just take whatever job simply because it's closest to your home. In order to enjoy establishing a family, you need to find a person whom you love and who you enjoy spending time with, and who also loves you and enjoys spending time with you. Not just get together for the sake of a marriage certificate because someone bothers you about that. In order to enjoy procreating, you need to a priori love your children and admire their progress. Not just have them because everyone is having children. And once you establish that for yourself, once you begin to strive towards leading a happy professional and family life, you will, knowingly or not, improve the society around you. It's not the ultimate goal, but it's just a nice thing that happens. With each of us better off, it's easier to help those who are less fortunate, it's easier to explore, and also to have fun. But that's easier said than done, because despite all of that innate motivation towards the good that each of us has within, we are bombarded by many happenstances of reality that try to twist our path, that try to deviate us from it. The disease, addiction, conflict are still very much present in our lives today, and because of them, sometimes it is very hard and even impossible to fulfill your purpose, let alone to enjoy the process of doing so. Nevertheless, the mere history of our species teaches us that against all odds, life is meaningful, life is good, and step by step we are fixing all of those tragic happenstances. In fact, it is because life is inherently good that we know what's bad and we fight it. I hope this video was helpful to you. I am Roman, and I'll see you next time.